All right, guys, hello and welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. We're going to be continuing with our coverage of the crisis, of the horror of the G word in Gaza. Try to avoid those algorithmic censors here. Today, we're going to be focusing with an emphasis on how Israel has had an assault, a concerted campaign on attacking humanitarian aid in the region in Palestine, right? Obviously, in the news circuit recently, we have heard a lot of discussion and analysis around allies of Israel, namely the United States, obviously, and Western Europe, cutting aid contributions to UNRWA. That's the United Nations Relief Works Association for Palestine. How they have cut funding for that on Israeli allegations that something like 12 or 13 of its members had participated in the October 7th attack. We'll be discussing that towards the end of the video to show how, this is just another example of trying to expedite ethnic cleansing through, cutting medical services, cutting food aid, cutting water aid, and all these sort of things. Obviously, Israel, I'm sure most of you heard, Israel has not provided literally any evidence of this. And despite the UN responding in a positive, quote unquote, positive light by sacking these accused employees immediately, we have still seen the Western countries without any evidence, despite this UN response, cutting aid at a time when the ICJ and stuff is saying that, humanitarian aid needs to be ramped up, not cut back. And this is, spelling absolute catastrophe for the Palestinian people at a time when it's already catastrophe, absolute doomsday for the Palestinian people. And when you think something can't get worse, apparently it can, right? So we'll be discussing that towards the end of the video quickly, because I'm sure a lot of you have already heard some stuff about that. But we're going to be focusing on, in particular, Israel's attack on ambulances, continued attack on hospitals, despite some of them being back up and open for operation, murdering of doctors, murdering of nurses, and things like that. And then we'll also be discussing towards the end of the video as well how Israel has announced that they will be attacking Rafah. For those of you who don't know, Rafah is the, I believe, only border crossing out of the Gaza Strip that is going out of southern Palestine, southern Gaza Strip, into Egypt, right? And as you guys know, all of the Palestinian population has been gradually moved to the south for the most part. So pretty much every human being in Palestine, the majority of Palestinians are in this Rafah area, and now Israel is talking about assaulting it. Clearly a genocidal campaign. This is the areas where they had told Palestinians to go to be safe, and we saw this with Khan Yunis as well. If they saw Khan Yunis, they told them to go to Khan Yunis, you'll be safe there, and then they attacked. It's almost like they're purposefully boxing in Palestinian civilians into, a certain space to make it easier to bomb and starve and, commit pseudo-germ warfare on, right? So anyway, guys, we'll go ahead and jump into our source material here and try to clip through this. We have a couple of Al Jazeera articles for you. Obviously, they've been an indispensable source with this. That is Qatari state media. And then we also have one from Electronic Intifada, who I always highly recommend. Says Israeli snipers kill 21 civilians outside Gaza's besieged Nasser hospital. Rights groups say repeated attacks on medical facilities, doctors, and ambulances must be investigated for war crimes. Israeli snipers have killed at least 21 Palestinians after they opened fire and displaced civilians trying to reach Nasser hospital in southern Gaza's Khan Yunis. Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud reported from Rafah, said on Friday that snipers had surrounded the hospital and were shooting at every moving object as people were trying to reach it from two densely populated residential neighborhoods near the facility. The area around the hospital is very dangerous, and it has turned into a combat zone, he said, noting that the hospital is the only place right now in Khan Yunis that has some water left. And we will see other instances as we go through this. Not just attacking hospitals, which we are clear of, not just attacking different aid workers from doctors to nurses to first responders, but also shooting and killing people that are going, like civilians that are going to areas where they can receive aid. I mean, this is horrific, guys. I mean, what clearer example there is no reason to even be up and around and engaging in military activities in these quote unquote safe zones where you have people trying to get humanitarian aid, let alone to be indiscriminately and quite clearly purposefully killing them as they get that aid, right? Rights groups said that Israeli military is, okay, we already read that. Hospitals and other medical facilities are civilian objects that have special protections under international humanitarian law or the laws of war. Mahmoud said this represents a new trend of targeted killings by Israeli snipers who shoot Palestinians in the streets. People inside the medical facility would also become easy targets by trying to retrieve the bodies. So that's just crazy. You know, you have people fleeing to the hospital, one of the only places where you can get humanitarian aid and obviously medical treatment, water. You know, you have people going there. IDF shoots and kills them, and then they also shoot and kill the medical professionals who go out to try to get the body or get the wounded. I mean, this is Nazi level shit, guys. And honestly, I don't know. I don't even think the Nazis were this genocidal in their assault on medical infrastructure, right? I don't think they were. Maybe they were. Somebody can quote me if I'm wrong there. But this is insane. This is why we say Israel is, you know, Jewish Nazis at this point. It's horrific. Attack drones also targeted a group of young people who gathered on the roof of the hospital because of the communications blackout. They were trying to get signals for internet to the mobile phone so they could communicate with family members, you know, trying to prevent the truth from getting out. Just horrifying, guys. We have some statistics here. I want to actually show you guys this. So this video I'm going to show you is inside of the Nasser hospital, I believe, and it shows medical staff being shot by the IDF and just absolute cold blood while they're trying to work on patients. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this for you guys. Obviously, trigger warning, content warning. It is graphic.
Medics to treat sick and injured Palestinians at the severely short-staffed Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis. This nurse has been shot in the chest while on duty. His colleagues say he was deliberately targeted by Israeli forces. This doctor being treated on an operating table was also shot at work.
While Dr. Nusayb was on duty in the operation room at Al Nasser Medical Complex, he was deliberately shot by a sniper from the occupation forces. He sustained a gunshot wound to the chest and is currently in critical condition. The danger now extends to medical personnel while they are performing their duties. It's no longer just displaced individuals and patients being targeted.
Doctors at Nasser Hospital are demanding foreign intervention to ensure safety of medical workers. US President Joe Biden described Israel's war on Gaza as over the top and says it's trying to stop the fighting.
Because I think if we could get the delay for that, the initial delay, I think that we would be able to extend that so that we could increase the prospect that this fighting in Gaza changes.
Meanwhile, Israel has intensified strikes in Rafah, where Palestinians were told to relocate for their safety. 8 people, including children, have been killed in the bombing on Thursday. Israel's blockade on food, fuel and medicine entering Gaza has made it difficult for the Strip's understocked hospitals to operate effectively. And Israeli sniper fire on Palestinian medical workers is putting the treatment of their patients in jeopardy. Barbara Angopa, Al Jazeera.
Okay, yeah, obviously, so we have the incidents there, guys, of Israel killing nurses and doctors, attempting to kill nurses and doctors while they are working, while they're trying to save lives. Just completely egregious, guys. Here we have a visual aid of hospitals in Gaza attacked by Israeli forces. This is the amount of times. Al-Shifa, Al-Quds, Indonesian hospital. Just terrifying. The Palestine Red Crescent Society, which is, you know, I guess the Palestinian or Islamic equivalent of the Red Cross Society, obviously, said on Friday that Al-Quds Hospital in northern Gaza City also suffered significant damage as a result of being fired on by Israeli tanks. The Israeli army deliberately targeted the society's headquarters and vehicles to put them out of service. Excuse me. This is while hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been in the past few weeks forced to flee to Khan Yunis to Rafah further south, which lies at the border with Egypt. So again, guys, this is them gradually moving them to the border because they want to they want to ethnically cleanse the area, obviously. They are telling them, go here, you'll be safe. As soon as everybody's there, they start bombing, killing, drone strikes, everything, destroying the hospitals, destroying the infrastructure. And then they say, okay, well, we're attacking here, so you need to go further south. Now they are as south as they can possibly go. And we're looking at a situation potentially, if this doesn't reach some kind of conclusion or political resolution, where you're going to be having the IDF marching on Rafah. And if you don't have Egypt allowing those Palestinian refugees in, like they've stated that they will not, because then it becomes their political problem, their national security issue. It's a whole mess of things. You're going to have the Palestinian people caught between the Egyptian border, which is militarized, and the IDF, and it's going to be a massacre unlike anything ever seen before. More than half of Gaza's population of 2.3 million is now in Rafah, the last place previously designated as a safe zone by the Israeli army. Israel has said it plans to launch a ground assault on Rafah soon, ignoring warnings of catastrophe by the United States and the United Nations. They don't give a shit what the U.S. has to say. That is how far along this genocidal, maniacal campaign they are. And obviously, like we've talked about in past episodes, I'm sure you've heard other political analysts say, Netanyahu, despite elements within his regime and the Israeli people wanting a ceasefire, wanting to get their hostages out, wanting to see some kind of conclusion of this, his whole political career is staked on this. He has to show some kind of victory. Otherwise, he's going to end up not only not having a political career, but he'll probably end up in prison, right? Moving on here, guys, we're going to go to this article from the Electronic Intifada. Israeli troops target ambulances, kill medics in Gaza City. Says Israeli troops deliberately targeted a Palestine Red Crescent Society convoy, killing a paramedic and wounding 2 others. The convoy was attempting to transfer patients from Al-Ali Hospital in Gaza City to facilities in the south when it was attacked on Wednesday. The mission had been coordinated with the Israeli military, the humanitarian group said. So right here you have an instance of, again, when it came early on, when Israel was bombing these schools, bombing these hospitals, bombing these refugee camps, organizations like the Palestine Red Crescent Society and like UNRWA would give the GPS coordinates to the IDF, saying, this is where we are, do not do military campaigns here, do not bomb here. And then no sooner than they had given out that information that those areas would get bombed. I mean, just horrific, just a clear example of not giving a fuck about the Palestinian people, not giving a fuck about international law. That is what we're seeing here. And in this instance, we see they knew that there was a humanitarian aid, a first responder convoy coming to help people, and they deliberately targeted it because they were working in coordination with the IDF. There's no excuse of we didn't know. They knew. They not only knew, but they were helping to facilitate it, apparently. Red Crescent paramedic Mohammed Al-Omari, father to 3 children aged between 8 and 14, was killed. He and the rest of the crew were trapped for more than an hour while bleeding. The Red Crescent said that 12 of its colleagues, including Al-Omari, had been killed while carrying out their humanitarian work since the beginning of the war. The actual number may be higher. The fate of 2 Red Crescent paramedics and a young girl they were attempting to rescue in Gaza City last week remains unknown. So you may have heard about this one. I believe they were stuck in an ambulance or a car or something, and this little girl's family was killed. Everybody in there was massacred aside from her, and she was on the phone with first responders or humanitarian organizations crying and like begging for help, and they were trying to get to her and they couldn't, and people were killed while trying to get to her. Horrific. I don't even know what to say, guys. Yeah, here's a example of this. It has been 10 days since we have heard anything from our colleagues Yusuf Zaino and Ahmed Al-Madoun. the PRCS ambulance team who went to rescue 6-year-old Hind. We want answers. We want truth. You can see this here. And now these people are missing who tried to save her. Who knows if they were killed or if they were taken hostage by the IDF. None of Gaza's 36 hospitals remain fully functional. Only 1/3 of them are partially functional, according to the WHO. And this is not a Palestinian rag. This is not a Palestinian organization. This is a Western-led order, hegemonic order organization, World Health Organization. A mere 4 out of the 22 health facilities run by UNRWA remain operational, according to the embattled agency saving Palestinian refugees. The destruction of the health sector has been a key feature of Israel's military campaign in Gaza. This is genocidal, guys. Ghassan Abu Sita, a British Palestinian surgeon who was working in Gaza during the first weeks of the war, has said that the targeting of health facilities and medical workers is aimed at making Gaza unlivable and to force the expulsion of its population. Al-Amal Hospital under siege. Israeli forces are besieging hospitals in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, which has been the focus of its operation in recent weeks. The Red Crescent reported heavy artillery shelling and gunfire in close proximity to Al-Amal, which it administers in Khan Yunis. The hospital building was hit with shrapnel. The hospital, which is adjacent to the Red Crescent headquarters in Khan Yunis, has been under siege for 18 days. On Wednesday, 2 patients being treated at the hospital were injured by Israeli troops positioned at the hospital gate. And by now, I'm sure you guys have seen this viral video as well of in the West Bank. This isn't just happening in Gaza, although, of course, it's even more savage and beyond comprehension in the Gaza Strip. But we are seeing this kind of violence on medical infrastructure and humanitarian aid in the West Bank as well, where we saw settler militias in conjunction with the IDF put on disguises as being nurses and doctors and other healthcare professionals, and then go into a hospital armed to the teeth and shoot suspected Hamas operatives while they slept or while they were being treated or unconscious in their beds as a result of their wounds, like point blank execution style. Masquerading as an enemy force or as medical professionals or as humanitarian aid professionals is another war crime. The list of war crimes with the Israeli regime is, I don't even know. I mean, you could fill the Encyclopedia Britannica with it at this point if you went all the way back to the initial occupation in 1948, right? Last week, Hedaya Hamad, a Red Crescent program director, was shot and killed by Israeli troops while attempting to rescue displaced people sheltering out Al-Amal. 2 Red Crescent volunteers were arrested while attempting to evacuate Al-Amal, the humanitarian group said on Tuesday, which leads me, again, to my conclusion that I maybe made earlier, that those that were sent out to rescue that young 6-year-old Palestinian girl, Hind, were potentially taken as political prisoners, right? I'm going to play this video here for you guys. It says, a heartbreaking scene captures an elderly sick woman forced to evacuate Al-Amal Hospital yesterday, resting on one of the hospital beds along a rugged path, fleeing the ongoing Israeli bombardment and evacuation orders. Go ahead and roll this, see if we don't have an ad, though.
خلينا ننزلها ما فيش دحله من قدام حاليا اخلاء نازحين مساعدتهم في التقدم الدبابه قدامنا
I mean, just really paints the image here, doesn't it, guys? Of I can't even imagine. These everyday scenes are what really drives this horror home, you know. Citing the health ministry, Oka added the Israeli military has prevented the movement of ambulances, the disposal of medical and non-medical waste, and the arrival of the wounded and sick to Nasser Hospital. A nurse was reportedly shot and critically injured while in the hospital's operating theater on Thursday. This is what we talked about. And we already played a video for. Oka said that the person who was shot by sniper while attempting to collect water Al-Amal was a woman. Al Jazeera identified her as a 14-year-old Ruwa Kadea. Video shows people recovering her lifeless body from the street, her blood staining the road, and then using a pulley system to move a container of water from one side of the road to the other. Crazy, guys. On Wednesday, Benjamin Netanyahu rejected a ceasefire proposal put forward by Hamas, insisting that, quote-unquote, only total victory will allow us to restore security in Israel, both in the north and the south. We already talked about how 2.3 million, a majority of them, are in Rafah. The Norwegian Refugee Council said on Thursday that an assault on overcrowded Rafah would risk the aid system in Gaza coming to a halt, in conjunction, obviously, with UNRWA having the majority of its funding wiped out overnight. It says here, it would turn Rafah into a zone of bloodshed and destruction that people won't be able to escape. There was nowhere left for people to flee to, she said. Disease and starvation already persist among the displaced population in Rafah. Hepatitis A, gastroenteritis, diarrhea, smallpox, fucking smallpox, lice, and influenza were reported in each of the 9 shelters. The UN Secretary General said on Wednesday that he was alarmed by reports that Israeli military intends to focus next on Rafah. Antonio Guterres added that such an action would exponentially increase what is already a humanitarian nightmare with untold regional consequences. The Biden administration also says it opposes an Israeli incursion into Rafah. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby, who has fiercely defended Israel's operation throughout the war, said on Thursday that it would be a disaster for those people and we would not support it. So we are seeing even the United States is at this point, officials in the U.S. and the Biden regime are like, Jesus fucking Christ. They understand that it's not necessary. They understand at their core as well that it is ethnic cleansing, and they can't. This potential assault going to happen on Rafah is so horrifying that they can't even, John Kirby, who has just been lying and lying and lying, it's what he gets paid his fucking gold denaries for, can't even lie about this. He's like, this would be bad. And I mean, if you want to envision this, and I don't know how Egypt would respond, but you as this is happening, you have 2 instances that you could see, really, I think. The one instance is as the assault begins, Egypt holds their breath till last minute, hoping it'll get called off. You have the IDF coming in. You have the Rafah border here, Palestinians caught in the middle, and people getting murdered, and pushed literally by the hundreds of thousands in a mass wave of people pushing to get into Egypt, and the border there is militarized. And you could have one of 2 options where at the last minute Egypt opens the floodgate and lets the Palestinians in because they don't want to, despite their sort of pseudo support, they don't want to actually have the Palestinians there. But I think in that moment you'd probably see them finally open the gates at the last minute because Sisi's government, he's a despot. He's not necessarily popular in Egypt. And I think, Arab populations, Muslim populations are already very much on the side of the Palestinian people, even if the regimes that govern them aren't. And I don't think he'd be willing to, lose the political clout by allowing a massacre like that to happen on his border in such a clear black and white situation. But then, I don't know, you could also have a scenario where not only is the IDF bombing and shooting at them, then the Israeli or the Egyptian border guard starts doing it as well. And I don't think we can even fathom what that might look like, Just terrifying, guys. Last little article we're going to touch on here, and we'll do it quick because I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of analysis already about the shutting down of UNRWA. But for those of you who haven't, I figured maybe it would be worthwhile to touch on and, sort of ruminate on the implications of what it means to have this organization having all of its funding cut, right? So we have this from Al Jazeera. Says, what is UNRWA and why is it important for Palestinians? The UNRWA chief, Philippe Lazzarini, has dubbed the steps to suspend funding an additional collective punishment for Palestinians already reeling from a near 4 months of nonstop Israeli bombardment. The termination of aid came swiftly after Israel accused 12 UNRWA staff of involvement in the October 7th Hamas attack inside Israel. The UN has taken action against UNRWA staff linked to the attack, but has voiced its opposition to the defunding. If the funding remains suspended, we will most likely be forced to shut down our operations by the end of February, not only in Gaza, but across the region. And be clear, UNRWA is the main organization, the UN-backed organization, coordinated organization, providing relief for Gazans, for Palestinians. Like, this is it. The Palestinian Authority and what nominal government they have in the Palestinian polities is not the main organization providing relief. It is not even the main organization providing schooling and this, that, and the third, right? It is UNRWA, right? If you shut this down, what remains of any sort of political structure, infrastructure, humanitarian aid, obviously, is gone. And right now they're talking about, if we go from today, they have 18 days by the end of February. And then, I mean, you already have people starving en masse. I don't think anything like this would have been seen in history. In terms, I mean, yeah, that's not exactly accurate. But in modern history, we will not have seen such a purposeful inducement of famine and deprivation in human history, in modern human history. Insane, guys. The Palestinians have accused Israel of falsifying information to tarnish UNRWA in Gaza, which employs 13,000 people. So, again, a note here, guys. They said that like 12 or 13 people were involved in October 7th from UNRWA out of 13,000 employees in the region. Insane. They run schools, healthcare clinics, and other essential services. Experts have said Israeli allegations remain unverified. UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric said on Tuesday that Israel has not yet shared the intelligence dossier with the UN. Yasmin Ahmed, the UN Director of Human Rights Watch, HRW, told Al Jazeera that HRW is not aware that the UN or in any of the states that fund UNRWA have seen any written documentation of evidence that establishes what has been alleged by Israel. That is to say, they have not been provided. So these people that the United States and Western European countries mostly that have cut the aiding to UNRWA, the only lifeline of life in Gaza, they have not seen any evidence. They just took what the IDF said. They just took what Israeli officials said and said, okay, that's it. These people have already been complicit in genocide. If they are not already complicit in genocide, they aren't just complicit in it now. They're not just, they are actively taking part in this genocide. Part and parcel, partners straight down the middle. We're going to starve the Palestinians to death. That's what this is. Why was UNRWA created? UNRWA was created by the UN General Assembly on December 8th of 1949 to provide basic support, including food, healthcare, education. More than 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced. That's the Nakba, obviously. What does it do? UNRWA supports some 6 million Palestinian refugees who live within and outside Palestine. It is like a quasi-state providing direct services such as schools, primary health centers, and other social services. It also provides loans to Palestinians. Like I said, like it says here, a quasi-state. Given the not complex but severed and balkanized political situation of the Palestinian people, UNRWA is one of the main kind of cornerstones of some semblance of normalcy and stability in a region, right? And they're going to just completely remove that by cutting funding. However, it does not run refugee camps. UNRWA operates separately from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, which was also established in 1949. While UNHCR provides temporary protection and assistance to refugees, it does not have a mandate over Palestinian refugees within the UNRWA fields of operations. And that is because the situation of Palestinian refugees has been so ongoing and so egregious and so fucking horrible in conjunction with the IDF occupation that it has to have its own fucking special organization under the UN. That should be pretty telling. Although it provides humanitarian aid to Palestinians, the UNRWA body does not have a mandate to resettle Palestinian refugees because Israel opposes it. In 2021, about 500,000 children were enrolled in UNRWA schools. Social safety net program assistance reached 400,000 beneficiaries, and 1.7 million received critical humanitarian aid. There is no humanitarian aid. There is no educational infrastructure or medical infrastructure, any of this stuff, refugee infrastructure in the region without UNRWA. And they are going to cut it out in a matter of 18 days' time. They will be out of funding. 1 million Palestinians from Gaza, or nearly 45% of the enclave's population, have been sheltering UNRWA schools, clinics, and other public buildings. UNRWA schools and buildings operate beyond capacity to provide shelter. Nearly the entire population in Gaza now relies on UNRWA for basic necessities. The UN agency employs thousands of Palestinians in schools, healthcare centers, and other social programs, providing much-needed employment opportunities to Palestinians living under Israeli occupation for 7 decades. More than 30,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, West Bank, and in vast refugee camps in neighboring Arab countries work for UNRWA. Its services in Gaza have increased since 2005, when Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade, causing an economic collapse with one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. So this is another thing that UNRWA does, is they are, like, I believe, the biggest employer in Palestine. They are the only reason it's just so sad and telling of how bad the situation is in Palestine, that a UN relief organization is the number one employer staving off utter economic collapse and stagnation. That's insane. So if you could think about it, that the misery and suffering in hell, open air concentration camp of Gaza situation is the only reason there is any employment there at all, because of the UN organization. Where has that happened anywhere in the world, in history? Israel has long sought to end UNRWA, arguing that the UN body perpetuated the issue of Palestinian refugees because it allows Palestinians to transfer refugee status across generations, and Israel has refused to accept the right of return of these refugees. Israel's recent allegations toward UNRWA employees surfaced the same day as the ICJ's interim ruling ordering Israel to prevent genocidal acts and scale up to Gaza. So like we saw earlier in the article and from other analysts, this is collective punishment, and the West, the United States and Europe, is part and parcel 100% complicit in it. And yeah, guys, what's coming with the attack on Rafah, UNRWA being cut, somehow, despite everything, a continued escalation of assault on medical infrastructure and first responder support, as somehow this crisis just keeps getting worse. And until we see a political resolution, which looks like we're moving towards, despite Israeli refusal to negotiate, quite frankly. Again, I still believe that I think what's going to happen, because the pressure is mounting globally, domestically in Israel, from also obviously from the U.S., number one supporter of Israel, to end this. But again, like we talked about, Netanyahu and his administration and his party need to show some kind of victory. I don't know. I think what we're going to see is a massacre at Rafah, beyond anything we've already seen in this war. And through that, there's going to be a big concerted PSYOP propaganda campaign by Israel. Some kind of announcements of maybe killing some Hamas officials. I don't know. But then they're going to use this horror as a showing, look at the map. We've done it. And then I think we'll see Israel willing to capitulate sometime after that, maybe another several weeks and maybe even months of murder. But I think that's what we're going to see. I don't think Netanyahu's going to realistically actually negotiate on the level that Hamas is willing to negotiate until this massacre has happened. And I don't see any way of avoiding it, unfortunately, unless Egypt maybe opens their borders. But again, that's a whole other story. That's not a great option either. I guess it's a better option than everyone in Rafah being liquidated. But again, guys, that's all I have for you. Just some coverage of some of the more humanitarian crisis going on in the region. As always, like, subscribe, comment for that algorithm. Tell your friends about the show. Really appreciate you guys being here with me. You can support my independent media work at Patreon at patreon.com/entitledmillennials. You can do that for $1 a month. Would really appreciate it if you would. And again, guys, you can also support independent media work here with one-time donations through PayPal at paypal.me/entitledmillennials. Thanks for all your support financially in that way as well. And thank you for everyone just always watching these videos, and especially those of you commenting with, positive feedback and just a lot of love and support for what I'm doing here. Thank you. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys. As always, I love talking the issues with you. I love hanging out with you, and I look forward to speaking with you all again very soon. Bye-bye for now.